Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. I have a woman on the show who has been here before, and you're going to want to hear the show. What she has to talk about is important. It has to do a little bit, well, a lot to do with President Trump's recent executive orders. She's an author, and I've interviewed her about her book. But Sue Ellen Browder she's won 8 investigative medical journalism awards, including the Project Censored Award, which many times it's called the Alternative Pulitzer Prize, which I'll go with that one as opposed to the one it seems people are winning these days. She's won it for news that didn't make the news about deadly doctors. And for more than 30 years, she's wrote hundreds of articles for the corporate press, including Cosmopolitan, which you're thinking, Um, and until she converted to Catholicism in 2003. She is the author of the book Subverted, which we did do a show about, and I'm going to put a show link in the show notes here so you can go look at that one as well. But the book is called Subverted: How I Helped the Sexual Revolution Hijack the Women's Movement. And she's spoken all over the place, especially at pro-life events across the country. She's appeared at the United Nations as on a Status of Women panel sponsored by none other than the Holy See. So, Sue Ellen, you have made your way around the world trying to spread the truths of the gospel as best as you can. But when I saw you recently, or not you, but your article in the National Catholic Register, I called you immediately because for those of you that didn't read it, the article is called "The French Philosophers Who Gave Us Radical Feminism and Transgenderism." And I contacted Sue Ellen Browder because it seems that executive order about there only being 2 genders, she had something to do with on a good side.
Right.
Sue
That's right.
Ellen, I know that's a big introduction. I am so excited to have you here. You are a wealth of knowledge. You are a powerhouse. And I think the left is kind of sad that you converted and came over to the side of truth.
Um,
Welcome.
I was looking for truth for a long time. I finally found it. Yeah.
Yeah, for people who didn't watch the show that we did on Subverted, can you give us a just short synopsis on how did you work for Cosmopolitan and how did
Oh
you
well,
come to work?
I was a young lady from Iowa, and I was very innocent. I went to New York City. I applied for a job in the New York Times, and it turned out to be a Cosmopolitan magazine. And I was a secretary there for, oh, I was only on staff for about 6 months, but then I wrote for the magazine for another, yeah, almost 30 years. Yeah, yeah.
But
But I did come into the church in 2003. Interestingly enough, I just told my priest the other day, I now I work with him quite a bit. He uses my computer for
God
his
help us.
classes, online classes. But I was very innocent about anything that was going on in the Catholic Church. I hadn't paid any attention to it at all. And I hadn't watched television for 10 years. And so when I came in, I was like I was like a child in the city of God. And I read the catechism and I just fell in love with it.
And you
I
did
didn't know
what?
anything. I just fell in love with the church.
Mhm.
It was the truth I've been searching for my whole life.
Yeah,
And
there
so
is
that,
something about that, right? When you see truth, it you get it. You know it's truth when you see truth.
yeah,
It
yeah.
strikes you.
Yeah, that's right. And I gave up my whole secular journalism career after I became Catholic. I
Why is that? Were they paradoxical to one another? Because
well
I know
because
from our previous article, you were writing untruths for Cosmopolitan because that's what they told you to do.
Well, yeah, I was lying. I mean, they had all sorts of rules. I don't have them right here, but I still have them. Helen Gurley Brown. I don't know if you know who she was anymore because she was the founder of the Cosmo she transformed Cosmo from a family magazine into a sex rag, and she actually had a list of rules on how to lie to the American public.
Wow.
And I was there as a journalist, and but I was also, as I say, I'm like, well, I guess this is the way the world is, you know.
Right.
Dumb, dumb,
Young,
dumb.
innocent girl coming from Iowa. I mean, this is what
Right,
you think the
right.
big shots are doing.
This is the real world. Well, I guess it
Yeah.
is the real world because after I became Catholic, I was writing at that point. I was writing for Woman's Day and for Reader's Digest. I had quit Cosmo years ago, and I was trying to write honest health articles. But when I became Catholic, I realized that so many of your health problems are spiritual. And you can't say, you could say in the women's magazines, you know, meditate, as do this meditation, but you couldn't really say love God
Yeah.
in the secular press. And so pray. You couldn't say pray. You could say meditate. You could be
Right.
you could practice yoga, but you couldn't say go to church. And
Yeah.
so I left my journalism behind at that point. My secular journalism. My income went from 90,000 down to $10,000 a month, a year.
Which was a lot of money 30 years ago.
Yeah, 10, well, yeah, 90,000 a year down to 10,000 a year is what I went when I became Catholic. Yeah, it's all right.
But God
I made it
provides.
back.
That's right. So
Anyway,
recently, and this was really powerful, this connection. And again, for those of you watching, go look at the show. Again, it's in the show notes, and it was very powerful. Tells the story about the sick intrusion of feminism and how true feminism was twisted and became
yeah.
sexual, and how so much. It's a rich conversation you're going to want to listen to. So recently, when we heard that President Trump said there are only two genders. It's just ridiculous, Sue Ellen, that we have to even have a president say the obvious.
I know.
It
Isn't this
blows my mind.
crazy?
Yeah, but that came, I mean, the previous administration allowed for the opposite, for there being as many as you wanted there to be. How did that happen? And what are your insights regarding that?
Well, the beauty of it is I wrote this article for the National Catholic Register, and if you can see the picture, this is Simone de Beauvoir and Sartre. The interesting thing is that this stuff leaped over the Atlantic Ocean from France to the United States. American feminism was not what it is, what radical feminism is today. American feminism, when I was young in the 60s and 70s, American feminism was about equal pay for equal work, being able to get out into the marketplace, being able to go to college, all of these things that now women take for granted were part of American feminism. Okay, what was French feminism? Okay, French feminism leaped across the Atlantic, and Simone de Beauvoir, who was Sartre's lover for 51 years. She was his mistress, but she wasn't his only mistress. He had a bunch of them. And but she wrote a book called The Second Sex. Well, I've got it right here. You can see I've done a lot of stuff. The Second Sex.
Yeah.
And this was the radical feminism that Betty Friedan wrote the book The Feminine Mystique. That was American feminism. Betty Friedan was a Marxist, and she was a little hostile towards marriage and the family, but not no, I'm sorry. She wasn't hostile towards the family and marriage. She was hostile towards her husband, whom she divorced.
Okay.
And anyway, but what we're saying here is Simone de Beauvoir is the one who said a woman is not born a woman; she is made a woman. She creates herself, and that's what she said. One is not born, but rather becomes a woman, and that is the mustard seed of
Yeah.
gender theory. You can become whatever you want to be. You're not God didn't create you. You create yourself. And that's where we got this transgender theory from. And then it leapfrogged across the Atlantic. Um, um, Kate Millett, who wrote Sexual Politics, took that patriarchy, Simone de Beauvoir's patriarchy, and sold it to America. So now sexual politics, right? So that's what we're talking about all the time is politics, 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 because this was Kate Millett who brought this over into the United States.
Which is so ironic, Sue
Yeah,
Ellen, because the left is always trying to say, get out of my bedroom, don't legislate what I do. It's like, you're the ones that are bringing it to us and bringing it into politics. No one before that was going into people's bedrooms saying, let's go make a law about something until they forced natural law to be contemplated and shattered with these unnatural ways
yeah.
of thinking. It's just crazy. It was forced upon us.
Right. Well, see, now the thing of it is, what I said, if we go back to my book, Subverted, How I Helped the Sexual Revolution Hijack the Women's Movement, what I said, what the one little thing that I knew at Cosmo when I was there was that the women's movement, the American women's movement, and the sexual revolution were two radically different movements.
Yeah.
So how did they get joined together? Well, that was what it was actually a man who did it, and that's what we talked about in Subverted. Is how the sexual revolution hijacked the women's movement, how they got joined together. But then when we go to feminism, which is what this article is about, how did we get from feminism being, equal pay for equal work,
Right.
jobs, education? How did we get from that to all of this craziness we've got going now?
With
Well,
transgenderism. Yeah.
that was basically Simone de Beauvoir and Sartre. And Sartre, uh, again, okay, what people don't understand when in the 60s and 70s when they were so popular, nobody knew about their past and nobody knew about their private lives. Their private lives have only come out in the 1990s and even this century. And so they were both okay. So let's talk about who these
I was
people
going to say,
were
who are they?
that gave us radical feminism, because radical feminism was based on the idea that there is no truth, there is no reality. You have to create it for yourself. Okay, okay. So both of them hated Christianity. Both of them did. Sartre rejected God the Father when he was only 12 years old. And he fancifully imagined, I'm reading from the article now, and he fancifully imagined seeing God tumble out of the sky and disappear. He's 12 years old. So now God disappears from the sky when he's 12 years old. He now bases his whole life on this. His lover, Simone de Beauvoir, was Catholic, and she was going to be even thought about becoming a nun. And then she left the church and became a radical atheist. Radical atheist. Simone, okay, so Sartre, listen to this. He was now Peter Kraft, who's a philosopher at Boston College, has written a series of books called Socrates' Children, the 100 greatest philosophers, and one of them was Sartre. Okay, he was a totally spoiled only child. Okay, now here's the clue. His father died when he was 1 year old. He never had a dad.
Yeah.
So he didn't trust men. He didn't think that they're fathers. He was against fathers, and she was against mothers. Simone de Beauvoir. So boy, he hated fathers. She hated mothers. His father died when he was 1. His mother doted on him. He read 300 books a year, basically one a day, and wrote millions of words. His conversations were uninterrupted and uninterruptible. If you left the room in the middle of one, he did not notice and went on talking. I was okay, but he's very famous, and he was very popular. He was short, 5'2", frog-faced, ugly, with a grotesque-looking crooked eye. If you can find a picture of him, to put up with your thing. I don't know if you can see it here, but he was really ugly.
No, you
And
got to lift it up. Yeah. But wait, that's okay. They can go look at the National Catholic Register. Okay,
yeah,
there
you
you
can
see.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was habitually dirty and seldom bathed. He wrote that he became a seducer of women to get rid of the burden of his ugliness. Okay.
Think how
And so
foolish a woman would have to be with a man like that in the first place.
okay, well this but then Simone, who was a philosopher, his co-philosopher, um, she was fascinated by him, and but she let herself, and she was beautiful, beautiful lady. She let herself be the object of Sartre's lifelong emotional abuse, infidelities, lies, deceptions, and insults. Those are the words of Peter Kraft. And Sartre bragged to her about his sexual conquests, secretly proposed marriage to other women. She's staying with him for 51 years, but never
That is
married,
some low self-esteem that you'd stay with a man like that.
and legally adopted one of his mistresses, leaving all of his money to his mistress and not to Beauvoir. Okay, so how did Beauvoir
Well,
handle all?
legally adopting, that's just disgusting right there, which means that it was the person was young enough
Yeah.
to be adopted by
Oh
him.
yeah. Well, he abused his students, his teenage underage students. He,
Wow.
he but he was very popular in France. And so how did Beauvoir handle this? She decided, well, first of all, she wrote The Second Sex, which was a bitter, angry book about the patriarchy, but she didn't recognize that really who she hated the most was this guy she was refusing to leave.
Sleeping with. Yeah.
And what did she do with all of the stuff that he was doing? She decided to imitate him. And she starts having sex with all these men, married, unmarried. Starts having sex with women and with her students. She was kicked off out of a school that she was teaching at for molesting a young underage girl. So instead of saying this guy is a jerk, I'm leaving him, she says, "Oh, I want to be a man like him." What? And anyways, and so that there you have it again. A woman is not born a woman, she becomes a woman. Well, she
Wow.
wanted to become a man.
Wow. It's funny that you mentioned the wound because research has shown that 87% of lesbians have a daddy wound. Um, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
research findings that uh, this attachment to something that, or, someone hurt me, which actually I know to be true just in my own personal situation. My mother left my father for a woman and for a time lived a lesbian lifestyle, but she was sexually molested by her father for a decade. And so it just lines up with, and she couldn't pray to a male God for many, many years. Fortunately for her, she was raised Catholic, so she had the Blessed Virgin Mary that she could maintain relationship with,
Of
and
course.
over years. Yeah, but anyway, all of this makes sense to me.
No, it does. And as I say, but for this to all come out of woundedness and then for it to be all over the internet and all over the world that this is a good way to be. No, 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 no. This came out of wounds, and I agree with you. It's very sad in some ways, very, very sad, but it's so infected our culture that it's what the wounds that these people experienced are sad, but the wounds that they inflicted on others are worse.
Yeah. Well, and so you said that it started there in France. Was it just that's one of the starting places? Do you know of any other country
That
where it
this
came, or
was
did
the
it just start
primary
in France and go everywhere?
This was the primary place, but now remember, this was right after or in the middle of World War II, between World War I and World War II. France was a mess, it had
Yeah.
been defeated. And so all they looked around them, these people, Beauvoir and Sartre looked around them and said, even, sorry the French, but I'll quote Sartre, he says, the world is a shitty mess. Well,
Yeah.
France was at that time. So he's and so Sartre thought that Marxism was the answer. Again, because they weren't looking at God and love, they were looking for a utopian solution to worldly problems. He went to Marxism as the answer to the problem.
Which seems to be the case for all of us. When we don't look at God, we look at the world, we
That's
get
right.
messed up. And it isn't until we draw back to our faith that we
That's right.
really do start seeing truth and feeling truth. You think about the recent election, and there it felt, and one woman said to me, it just felt like this oppression lifted off of me. And I said, that's how a lot of us are saying it felt this, the Marxism, the ugliness, the hatred that was just pushing the lack. If we had to do this, the lack of truth or the hatred for truth, it just suffocated. And so, you may not like the current president. Most people do, popular vote, right? But
Mhm.
it just, now that it's lining policies back up with truth, it's like this, oh, you're breathing again because it just makes sense. So,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. He just by saying that there are two sexes, two genders, that's
um,
it. How crazy is it that
that
you
we
have
have,
to say such a thing?
that's the truth.
That you have to say such a thing. But as I say, it all goes back to this concept of I create myself. I am me, whoever I want to be,
Yeah,
without. But how did you create yourself? Who, how did you put the sperm with the egg?
right.
How did you do that?
How'd you
You
create
know?
the sperm?
Yeah, right. No,
How'd
you
you
didn't.
create the egg?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Exactly. So anyway, but Beauvoir also hated mother. So he hated fatherhood. Sartre hated fatherhood. Beauvoir hated motherhood. And here she said, this is what she said about mothers. Ensnared by nature, the pregnant woman is plant and animal, an incubator, an egg. She scares children and makes young people titter contemptuously because she is a human being, a conscious and free individual who has become life's passive instrument. Women who want and have many children for Beauvoir were, quote, not so much mothers as fertile organisms, like fowls with high egg production.
Do you happen to know why she hated mothers? Did you know it? You
I
said
don't
you met
know
them
why.
or you did not meet them?
I don't know why she thought that to be a mother was to be passive and to just go along with the crowd and just, I'm sorry, but that's not wasn't my mother.
My mom either. No.
But she said that the unborn baby is quivering jelly and a slimy embryo from which a man, I guess Sartre, turns away in disgust. So she hated motherhood. She hated babies. She promoted abortion. In fact, she was instrumental in getting abortion legalized in France. She was very famous and very, very, very talented as an intellectual.
Do you think she had her own abortion since she
Oh,
was with
she
a
did.
man?
I'm sure she did. She also had young ladies come to her apartment and have abortions there.
They performed them at her apartment.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah. She was a very, very, very angry lady. But I can see why, if she was going to put up with all that junk that Sartre gave her, well, who wouldn't be angry?
Well, I think it came before that. I don't think you put up with it and then become angry. I think you have little self-worth or something happened to cause you to put up with it,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
subsequently causes additional
Well, she
anger.
abandoned her faith at a very early age. She was very proud. She was
Yeah.
beautiful. She was proud. She was very intellectual, very talented. So it was pride. It was pride. Pride, it's always pride.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
is.
she's not going to be humble like her mother. you know.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd be real curious to find out what the falling out was with her and her mom, how that happened. And
Yeah, yeah, she didn't talk about that much, or if she did, she wrote millions and millions of words, and I've got a bunch of their books, but I don't have all of them. So it's possible that, yeah, that she
yeah.
does say somewhere what kind of
Um,
relationship she had with mom. Mom was a Catholic though, and very devout, and she didn't want to go that route.
well, you said that that then kind of connects to transgenderism.
Mhm.
That now makes, I think in your article it
Well,
said that's the piece of the puzzle that connects to the transgenderism.
right, and she was having sex with women just like he was. She wanted to be him. He did ask her to marry him in college, and she refused. She didn't. She thought marriage was a trap for women, and so it was. And again, the American feminists who were really just looking for equal pay for equal work and
Right.
equal education and stuff. Betty Friedan read The Second Sex, read so Beauvoir's book, and she found it so depressing. She said it made me just want to go to bed for a week. And when she later met Beauvoir in Paris, she said the comforts of the family. This is Betty Friedan's writing about Beauvoir. The comforts of the family, the decoration of one's home, fashion, marriage, motherhood, all these things are women's enemy, Beauvoir said. It is not even a question of giving women a choice. Anything that encourages them to want to be mothers or gives them that choice is wrong. This is the French lady talking. The family must be abolished, she said, with absolute authority. And Friedan says, "Am I supposed to take this seriously?" She she didn't take it seriously. But Kate Millett, who wrote the feminist Bible in the United States in the 1970s, one-upped Friedan. Friedan got kind of kicked to the curb, and Millett became the person who
Yeah.
was talking about feminism in America. And
Why do
she
you
was
think it took on here? Oh, keep going. Go
what?
ahead. Why do you think it connected to us here? It seemed so radical. I mean, although I will say, as a Catholic in the 1960s is when we took prayer out of school, is when, many, I've heard exorcists talk about the demonic that took over in the nation when you pulled out. It's just, there was just a big convergence in the 60s where God came out and Satan went in. And then you have the sexual revolution. You have um, oh my goodness, why am I forgetting in New York? Um, where they're all in the having sex in the at the concert. Woodstock. Woodstock.
Oh, Woodstock,
Yeah,
yes.
all of those things were happening and it seemed to happen overnight.
Yeah, and okay, look, let's think about that. First of all, I'm a baby boomer. I call myself one of the oldest baby boomers that ever lived because the baby boom generation started in 1946 and I was born in January of 1946.
Okay.
So my baby boom, you've got a massive amount of spoiled children because we
Hmm.
were spoiled by Dr. Spock and our parents were told we were supposed to spoil us.
And
So
don't
you get
spank them.
huh?
And Dr.
Yeah.
Spock said, don't spank
Yeah,
him.
don't spank them, don't spank them. Oh, I was spanked a bit, but I should have been spanked more.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you've got a massive amount of young people who are innocent, who don't, who are or rather spoiled, and then you've got television. You've got something new that is going to broadcast all of this stuff all over, and so everybody is going to hear the same stuff.
Yeah.
So you've got all, and now look at the internet. Oh, you
Yeah.
know, so you've got, but you didn't have before the 1960s, you didn't have much. Most of the journalism was local newspapers and stuff. But when it became international television, and of course with the
You
media and
could
now
see
the
what was going on
internet,
in other parts of the world.
all of these ideas could be spread very rapidly.
Yeah.
And if the big newspapers think that Kate Millett is hot stuff because she's saying all these cool things,
Hmm.
um, pretty soon a lot of people buy into it. I bought into it. I bought into it. I wrote a book. Well, I didn't write it, the book itself. I worked with the woman who wrote a book called How to Make the World a Better Place for Women. And one of the things was abortion. Uh-huh. And probably if I was writing that today, probably transgenderism would be in it too. You know, you have to get out of this propaganda mind that we've been all sold in some way. And we're all sold some stuff. And the only way to get out of it is through Jesus Christ and
Yeah.
his love.
It is so
Yeah.
funny how arrogant we are because everyone I know talks about, advertising and stuff, and people are so stupid they fall for it, but not me. But not
We
me.
all do. We all.
Everyone thinks they don't fall for advertising.
Right, right. And here's the deal. Propaganda, see, that's what they don't understand. Propaganda is not a bunch of lies. It's half truth, selected truth, and truth out of context.
Yeah.
There's a lot of truth in it. There may be 90% true. It's the 10% that gets you. And and okay, Edward Bernays, I know how propaganda was began as a science.
Well,
Very
Bernays, and he's what's his name?
Freud, Freud's,
Nephew.
yeah, Freud's nephew.
Freud's nephew, and Freud was a sexual deviant.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But Edward Bernays, I've got the book over here on propaganda. He turned it into a science and told people how to sell ideas to the public. And so the public is constantly being sold ideas. You think I don't, they say, oh, advertising doesn't affect me. Hmm. Well, let's see now. We've got all these girls and women in all of these skimpy outfits running around. You don't pay attention to that if you're a guy? Maybe you do a little.
Yeah.
You know, the propaganda is very subtle. And we've all been sold a bill of goods. I certainly was for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And the only way out of it was for me was the truth of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Yeah. How did you find your Catholic faith again? Did you walk out of that movement going, this is ridiculous, something's not true about this, or did you find your faith and then
I
reassess?
had a very lovely marriage. We were married for 40 years. My husband died 16 years ago, but we had a beautiful, beautiful marriage. And I think he had been a Catholic all the time, although we were Episcopalians.
Hmm.
And we were searching for a church when we had moved to Northern California, and we were going to the Episcopal Church, and it was really pretty wonky.
Yeah.
And so we started looking around, and my husband said, "Well, maybe we should try the Catholic Church." And I says, "I'm not going to join that patriarchal old church." Right? And then we went into finally we did go to the church one night, and it was a Novus Ordo, so it was very similar to the Episcopal Church. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, that's the way it was.
Basically, the English rest. Well, Episcopalian is known as Catholic light. They
Yeah,
accept supposedly everything we do except for the Pope, which is why
yeah.
it's easier for them to go off the rails because they don't have any central core.
But you know what? Well, I looked back on this. In the year 2000, we went to Rome. My husband and I went to Rome on vacation during the Jubilee year. And we went into the Vatican, and they said if you walked through that door in the Vatican
Yes.
during the Jubilee year,
It washed
2000,
away all your
you're
sins.
Catholic.
Oh, you said you'd become Catholic?
Walk through that door.
Oh, I didn't know that. I knew it also said that if you walked through it, and I think like you had to go to confession or something, but washed away all of your sin and the punish that goes with
Walk
it.
through that door. They said you'd become a Catholic, and 3 years later we did.
There you
But
were.
also, huh?
There you were, Catholic.
But also, Margot Sheehan, I don't know if you know who Margot Sheehan was. She was head of pro-life in um, Arizona, I think. Yeah. I met her when I was writing an article for the National for the Reader's Digest on cohabitation. I mean, the article was against cohabitating because it was based on fact. It was based on science, and cohabiting ladies were not getting married and they were having bad relationships and blah blah blah. And they were getting divorced
Right.
more often and
That's
everything.
exactly statistically.
Okay, and so I would talk to Margot, who was head for the pro-life movement in Arizona. And after we became Catholic, my husband says, "Don't you think it's odd that we could only find a Catholic church up here to go to?" And I said, "Margot Sheehan." And I called her and I said, "Margot, have you been praying that I'm going to become a Catholic?" And she says, "Only for 7 years."
Oh, that's awesome.
So I had prayers and I had the door at the Vatican, and so there's lots of things that went together I was
Yeah.
a tough sell.
But you had left Cosmo at that point, hadn't
Yeah,
you?
yeah. I left Cosmo.
What caused you to
I,
leave Cosmo
why did
again?
I leave Cosmo?
Yes.
Because they were underpaying me. Not because I was lying, but because I met a lady, a young woman at a conference that I was giving actually, and she comes up to me and she says, "I just got this assignment from Cosmopolitan, and it's 20,000 words." I said, "Can't be 20,000 words. That's the size of a book." I said, "How much are they paying you?" And she told me they were paying her about twice for her first article than they were paying me.
Wow. Wow.
So, so I had an agent at that point, and I says, "This has got to stop." And so I had a big fight over I had just sold them an article, and they hadn't paid me yet, and we had a big fight over it. And they did pay. They finally did pay me and published the article, but I was done. So I
So
had
when
a
did you realize that? I mean, I know you knew you were saying things were lies, but when did you realize that I can't do this? This is wrong, and kind of come back to a more conservative perspective, a truth
well
perspective.
after I became Catholic.
So you were
After
still a little bit liberal minded before you became
I
Catholic?
was still, yeah, even when I became Catholic, okay, because if you read my book, Subverted, I had an abortion, okay. So even after I became Catholic, I thought, well, this Catholic stuff is mostly true, but not about abortion. 6 weeks into becoming Catholic, I went to confession for that abortion. To go to confession at that time, my knees were shaking. I could barely get into the confession. But I had a wonderful priest, who, again, that story is in Subverted, and he said he said I would meet that child
Oh,
after I died,
yeah.
and that panicked me. I was like, do I want to meet somebody I murdered? And I even said to him, and he said, "Would you rather that child not be alive?" And I said, "Well, no," and it healed me. And it was 6 weeks after I became Catholic that I let go of that abortion.
Mm,
Anybody who's watching this, if you've ever had an abortion, go to confession or find some way to know that God is forgiving, because that's the only way you can get through.
yeah.
So again, I was still holding on to that feminism stuff. Why? Because of a deep wound. There you go with your wounds again.
Yeah.
And we've got a very wounded nation
Yes.
with all these people. So you've got people who've been wounded by sexual abuse. You've got people who've been wounded by abortions. You've got people who've been all sorts of wounds
Yeah.
that
Divorce.
Divorce, the whole thing. It's battering.
Yeah.
We've got to get back to our Christian roots. We absolutely have to. And we have to do it one person at a time. You get back to your roots, I get back to my roots. We give up we're all sinners. We're all sinners. We can't say, "Oh, those bad guys, they did that thing and we're the good guys." No, 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 no. No, we're all sinners. Like Solzhenitsyn said, the line cuts through the human heart between good and evil.
Funny,
You
one
know?
of the things I say to people, Sue Ellen, especially since I just brought up divorce, is when someone's in a bad marriage, their friends will often say to them, "You deserve to be
Yeah,
happy." And they're not expecting. What I say to them is, "No, you don't. You're a sinner saved by grace. You deserve to burn in hell. I deserve to burn in hell. We
right,
don't deserve happiness, but because of God's grace, we have this choice to choose Him and get
right.
heaven." And that, again, it really resonates with people because if we go with these lies of things that we deserve and that we are good and we're going to think we're better than others, our sins don't matter. We're going to get into heaven anyway. I can call myself a male even if I'm a female. I can do these things and God's going to understand and it's all going to be good. And that doesn't sit with the soul. They try to make it sit with the soul, but it's uncomfortable until someone does look at you and say, "No, this is truth. The Catholic Church is truth. You're a sinner saved by grace is truth. You deserve to burn in hell is truth." And as much as it's a hard thing to hear, it gives you peace because you're like, "All right, you're right. What do I do here?"
Yeah, yeah. God's forgiveness and God's love gives us peace. And that is the only thing that gives us peace in the end.
So let me ask you this, just to keep on the topic. So do you meet or have you talked to a lot of people in the transgender movement or people who are transgender? And what do you say?
I don't know. I know. I wrote this article because I knew that Beauvoir had given them the mustard seed of gender theory. I don't.
You're
Do I?
hidden away in Wyoming, right?
Yeah,
So you don't see a
70%
lot of.
Trump. Yeah, I'm in a little town in Wyoming. Yeah, Lander with Wyoming Catholic College is here. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got a very devout Catholic community here. And how did I get to Wyoming from California? I followed my priest out here.
Oh, that's
He's,
great.
he's Eastern Catholic, Byzantine Rite, and
Hmm.
we have a very, very, very beautiful service. And I was living next door to him. After my husband died, they had a little house next door to on the church property that they wanted to rent, and they asked me to rent it. I've never bought a house; I've just rented. And so I did. I through many much discernment,
Hmm.
I did end up in that little house, and actually had a Monsignor who suggested that I take the little house. And that was, I prayed, okay, I'll tell you, it was an interesting story. There's an icon of Jesus not made by hands. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but one Sunday, I prayed before that icon. I said, "Lord, I can't hear you. Please give me some guidance on whether I should move to this little house." And that night at 10 o'clock at night, a Monsignor I've never met called me. He knew that my husband had died. He called me and he says, "How are you doing?" He was the oldest priest in the diocese, Irish. He says, "How are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing fine, Monsignor, but I've got this problem with the house." He says, "Take the little house." And he says, "And offer them $500 for it." I said, "Monsignor, this is California. I can't rent a place for $500." He says, "You can always go up, but you can't go down."
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's how I ended up in the little house next door to my priest.
Oh, that's
And
wonderful.
then he didn't have a computer, and so I started letting him use my computer, and I became his volunteer secretary. And then when he decided he was going to move to California or to Wyoming to Wyoming Catholic College. He's the first and only, as far as we know, Eastern Catholic, full-time Eastern Catholic priest in a Roman Catholic college in the United States. It's very unusual.
Wow.
And so I asked him if he wanted me to go with him, and he said yes. So I moved here.
That's really wonderful.
Yeah.
Just so your conversion seemed like it was a little bit slow, but it
A little bit slow. Yeah.
yeah.
I was 57 before I became
And
Catholic.
eventually you figured it out. What would you say to the young people who are struggling with transgenderism, feminist ideology, abortion mindedness, to try to get them? Because you can't just say this is the truth and you're wrong. What would you say?
No,
What seeds would you start to plant to help them
well,
to understand truth?
I would hope. What happened to me was I went to a Catholic church and started going to the services. You've got to pray on them. I'm sorry, you've got to open up your life to prayer, or it won't. You won't be able to find. When we pray to God, God calls us. And I would say, if somebody is going through a lot of stuff, listen a little closer and see if God isn't calling.
Yeah.
because because God was calling me, but I didn't think he wanted me. And actually, I wasn't going to come into the Catholic Church. I told my husband, I says, you can become a Catholic, but I can't. God doesn't want me.
Hmm.
God wants everybody. And the
Yes.
joy, and you've got to let go of all of that pain and everything, and let the whole universe is full of love. And God loves you the way he loves you. He loves you and wants to bring you into his joy and peace. And you will never find true joy and true peace until you find him. You're made for him. He's calling you. Listen,
Yeah.
listen, and don't blame yourself so much for all the wounds that you've suffered. Let God heal, and he will.
Well, go, sister. Keep on evangelizing. You're doing a good job. Do you happen to know when Beauvoir or Sartre died, if they had converted or did they stay atheists?
Oh no, the end of her life is interesting. Well, interestingly enough, he may have, and she was furious. What it was here's a book. This is and a friend of mine who was expert on Sartre. She read a lot of. It's called Hope Now, the 1980 interviews, and this was written by Sartre and a Jewish Orthodox Jewish man named Benny Levy. And here at the end, here's what here's what Sartre said. Sartre, who hated God, and he says, let's see. We must try to explain, this is what Sartre says. We must try to explain why the world of today, which is horrible, is only one moment in a long historical development. That hope has always been one of the dominant forces of revolutions and insurrections, and how I still feel that hope is my conception of the future. Beauvoir was furious. She said he was a turncoat. She never converted. And he didn't convert to Catholicism, although there is somebody said that he did call for a priest right at the end of his life. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah.
But
Well, we
but
can
here's
hope.
what Beauvoir said in the last of her. She never claimed she was searching for happiness. Beauvoir never said she was looking to be happy. She only claimed she was searching for freedom. Well, with that relationship she was having with Sartre, it's no wonder she wanted to be free. And she wrote 3 books about herself, her autobiography 3 times. And she said that she looked back on her lost youth and bitterly complained, I realized with stupor how much I was gypped. She felt gypped in the end. She wasn't all the things that she did, all her fame, all everything. No, she still felt gypped.
Wow.
That's
What
why
an
you
empty
follow
life.
these people, and that's what's going to happen to you. You know, don't
Wow.
follow this stuff out there. It will lead you down the wrong alley.
Wow. It has been very helpful to understand where this comes from because, I mean, in the spiritual component, I can easily see, Satan got a
Yeah,
grip on the minds. We lifted God out and it was a vacuum. So Satan moved in. I know how the Freemasons infiltrated the
right,
Catholic Church. I know how the communists actually infiltrated the
right.
Catholic Church in the country. And so, I mean, in a tangible way, we can see how it happens. But you've helped a lot in seeing how ideologically it can get people to change their thinking. And it doesn't happen in one statement. It happens in an insidious, way over
Yeah.
time.
Little things, and then you have the mass media who are saying, "Oh, you'll be happy if you do this."
Yeah. Well, and that's why now they're looking for global power. They're not happy with national power. Now it's just, I want to control the whole world, which again, we just see the fingerprints of Satan everywhere. And he's coming out because now with President Trump saying there are only two genders and I'm going to get men out of women's sports. I mean, it is as if the bowels of hell are screeching. How can you do that? And you look at some of these people and you're like, you really are completely irrational. You
Yeah,
really have no
you're right.
concept of
Yeah.
logic. And anyway, this has been wonderful. So I want people to get your book. Again, I'm going to push for them to go see the first show that we did because we talked a lot about
Okay.
the book that you wrote. And again, if you want to hold it up, it is called Subverted: How I
Subverted.
Helped the Sexual Revolution Hijack the Women's Movement. It was a great book, how the two really were separate until it became way more abortion minded than was intended. Well, it wasn't even intended to become abortion minded in the first place, as what you said in that podcast we did. Betty Friedan was pro life, I believe.
Well, she was. She was pro-family. She wasn't.
Yeah.
She said she was for the choice to become a mother.
Okay.
And that's what so many people don't want to give women today is that choice.
Because they know that is just the pinnacle. I don't want to touch a soft spot because I don't remember this answer, but did you end up having other children besides the child that you
Oh, I
sent to the
I
Lord?
had two children already. Yeah,
So you
yeah.
understand the joys of motherhood and the
Oh yeah, I didn't. Okay, this was right. This was when Roe v. Wade had been passed. That I had that abortion. And I thought, if the U.S. Supreme Court says it's okay, it must be okay.
okay.
This must be moral. I didn't, and I was working for Cosmo at the time, and so they were pushing abortion. Everybody was
Yes.
pushing abortion at that time, and I thought that I bought into the thing that this is just a clump of cells until it. But it was only later that I realized, oh my goodness, what have I done?
And this was your husband's child.
Yes,
What
yes.
did he ever say? Did he confess it as well for not stopping? Or I know this
No,
conversation
no,
wasn't supposed to be
later.
about that, but yeah,
Later, it was interesting. We never talked about that. We had that abortion, and he went with me to the doctors,
clinic.
and
Mm,
we had that abortion. And it was only years later that, in fact, it was only when we went to that priest, that Catholic priest, the first time to meet with him, that my husband said, we've, listen to the word, we've had an abortion." And the priest said, we have a number of people here who have. He didn't say, "Oh, we don't want you guys. Get out of
right,
here."
right.
Again, but my husband was the one. We've had an abortion. That's the first time that we talked about it. Was
Wow.
when, and also, okay, I'll tell you something else about wounds. Because my husband was severely wounded with bisexual abuse by his brother when he was a child. And when he was in his 60s, he was still having 4 and 5, I think he said 4 and 5, flashbacks a day.
Wow. Yeah.
And he went to the Catholic priest, confessed it, told him what it was, and through the priest told me what to do, and I listened to him, and we got rid of those flashbacks.
Wow.
He was healed. And that I've written another article a long time ago, but for the National Catholic Register on the fact that the Catholic Church heals these wounds. We hear all these stories about the sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. No, no, no. Yes, yes, very bad.
Yes, it
Whatever,
happened, and there were bad, bad, bad men that
bad,
did
bad,
that.
bad.
But the
You
church
don't want
itself was
that.
good.
But there's also healing in the Catholic Church, and that he was healed from those 5 and 6 flashbacks a day through the Catholic Church.
Wow.
So the last place you're going to look for, if you're outside of it, which is where I was, the last place you're going to go to find truth and love and freedom and healing is the Catholic Church. Go there anyway.
Oh, God
That's where
bless you.
it is.
Sue Ellen, I am so blessed that you came on the show. Do you write for the National Catholic Register often? Is this a
I,
regular job? People can,
it's not a regular job, but I'm a freelance. Yeah.
so people can find some of your articles by going
Yeah.
to the National Catholic Register.
And yes, and I've just written a book, which I think is going to get published very soon, called Christmas in the ICU. And it's about my husband and I. We spent 17 days in the ICU together. And I think
Well,
that's
when it's out, contact me. Let's do a show about it.
and it's about a lovely marriage. It's about good
Mm.
marriage. Oh, by the way, I want to say one thing because you were talking about marriage. I want to tell anybody who's having troubles in their marriage, because people have troubles in their marriage. I had troubles in my marriage. We
That's what
all
I do for a living. I save
Yeah,
marriages.
right. If you're having troubles in your marriage, you can fall out of hate just as easily as you can fall out of love. Maybe easier.
Oh, that's
Fall out of
fantastic. I love that.
yeah, yeah,
May
yeah.
I use that?
Of course.
Excellent. So I talk
Yeah,
about that idea of falling out
out
of
of hate.
love, as if it's something, some force that acts upon you and you fall and you trip and you can't control it. You can. So you
Yeah,
can fall out of hate.
yes, you
That's
can.
wonderful. I cannot wait to see that book. Uh,
Okay, well, we'll see.
Well, so I always end my shows the same way, and it's with this question. So name one thing you would have our viewers do differently as a result of something they heard today. Any instructions?
Well, just be open. Be open. Pray more. Pray more. If you're not praying, start praying. If you are praying, pray more. I
Amen.
that that's that is until you can finally pray always.
That's the truth. You're so
I'm working
happy
on
and
that.
bubbly.
I'm
Yeah.
working on that.
Oh, God bless you. Well, all of you watching, do look for Sue Ellen's book. There's a link to it in the show notes. Click on it, get it. You have to, it is so helpful in understanding what it is we're going through right now and how we can help change the minds of those who have been captured by these faulty ideologies. And like she was, we don't jump into it, but we are gently subverted. And so how do you gently unsubvert somebody? And you can only do so with truth. So get a copy of her book. Also, go find her articles in the National Catholic Register and beyond. She's been writing for decades, and she's been such a blessing to those of us that have read her work. Follow me on this channel. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, X, and Rumble, as well as this one. And please make sure to like and share these shows. I mean, I don't know how censorship is. It just was recently censored again. So now that Trump is in the office, we'll see if there's any tangible proof that the power brokers are not trying to silence truth anymore. But just in case, go subscribe to my newsletter at breakfastwithbacon.com. That's my website. You can learn good things about the ministries I'm doing, which since Sue Ellen mentioned it, the Standers Ministry, Sacred Standers, I help God through me save marriages of people whose spouses have divorced them, annulled them, are cheating on them, have fathered or mothered a child with somebody else. So those marriages can be reconciled, and we've already had we've had dozens of marriages reconciled already of people who once said, I will never get back with you. Well, guess what? They did. So minds can change, hearts can change, and you can help us be a change agent. I think that's all that I have to say here. Now we're going to see how smart, I know you're very smart, how much Sue Ellen remembers. Okay. I am Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I'd like to remind you always to live your life. That's your cue.
Sunny side up.
You got it.